You're listening to This Week in Ecommerce, the Ecom Nation podcast. Dive into the top online retail headlines with your hosts, Paul Waddy and Mal Chia. Let's load up the cart. This Week in Ecommerce, episode 26. I am Mal Chia, and with me on the road is Paul Waddy. Paul, how are you?
Yeah, good. Joining from the road this week. I'm good. Same old, plugging away. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I'm doing really well. It's been very, very busy lately, which is great. So, no rest for the wicked, as they say.
Absolutely.
And I see that last week we were both on the speaking circuit. You were at Ecommerce Connect in the North Shores of Sydney. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Ecommerce Connect is an event put on by my accountants, Kelly Partners, who is also does the accounting for a lot of great ecom brands. So, they put a lot of time and effort into into sort of building the ecom community. So, massive shout out to them. And if anyone is looking for an accountant specialising in e-commerce, speak to Natalie or Danny there. But, it was a good event. Just had a chance to speak to chair of a discussion with Zane and Zane from Mason Asada, and Lockie from True Protein, along with Vic from Us Republic a little bit earlier. It was a really good event. How was eTail? You were at eTail last week.
Yeah, I was. So eTail, I had the pleasure of being on the keynote panel on AI on the first day, which is talking about lessons from the trenches from people who've been experimenting with AI in retail since last year, I guess. And then on day 2, did the opening keynote on the value perception gap, which is all about brand and building brand and value in your business. Yeah, it was great. It was fantastic. So really well attended event, really well curated speakers. Big focus day 1 was really about AI. So a lot of discussion around that and where everyone's at. The TLDR is that no one's got it figured out, from the largest businesses to the startups. People are still very much in experimentation mode. And I was kind of advocating for a more rigorous approach to make sure that it becomes more organizational wide. But one of the things I talked about, which did get a lot of traction, was about the importance of AI in terms of leveling the playing field for a lot of retailers, particularly for things like, demand planning, forecasting, anything which is algorithmic. The ability now for every organization to have access to that, I think, is a game changer. And then obviously talking about brand as well on day 2. But one of the biggest insights for me, though, was how everyone seems to very much be in the same space around focusing this year on efficiency. And again, this is from talking to very large brands who are, turning over in the billions, to brands who are turning over in the tens to 20 millions. Everyone has a real focus on efficiency this year, where suddenly the wind has been taken out of the sail of this growth at all costs mentality, and really just focusing on efficiency. Did you find some of the same conversation happening at Ecommerce Connect?
Yeah, very much so. And just generally, that's the word on the street. Is I think it's sort of the answer is not spending more on Facebook, and that's just kind of like people are realizing that. I think smart operators are realizing that you just need more than that. And as you're talking about, and as actually we talk about with a lot of brands, is we'll actually advocate for them to spend less. We've done that heaps of times, right? Gone in and said, actually, the quickest way for you to increase your profit is actually to cut your spend drastically. So, yeah, I think it's efficiency is the key word. And, you can't do that easily without sort of knowing your numbers. And I guess that's a big benefit of what we've been doing with Ecom Nation, is digging in there and making sure people understand their numbers before just dialing up spend. And, yeah, I think money's tight right now, Mal, so you've got to be careful how you spend it. So definitely that just means efficiency across the board, but especially in your paid media at the moment, which is typically your biggest operating expense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something which, with the smart retailers, who we work with, such as like, the GDAPs, the Mason, the GDAPs, the Muscle Republics, etc., they're able to really preserve their margin, by focusing on adding value in terms of what the value which they're adding through their brand, their product, etc., rather than just going straight for discount all the time.
Yeah, I think there's no surprise. Like you just mentioned a couple of brands there that we work with at the agency, Budgie Smuggler, GDAP. You could probably throw, Acacia into the mix and a bunch of others that, people say, like, you have to spend 20, even 30% on marketing, well, MER, well, these guys are spending something percent.
Mm.
I hear it all the time. No, you need to spend more, 20, 30. These are great, highly profitable brands spending less than 10% on paid media. So we need to sit up and say, hey, if they can do that, why can't we? As Adam Bundy Smuggler said to us, gee, I hate putting money in the pocket of Meta. And it's finding that balance between, if you can scale, great. But if you can't, don't. Find other ways to grow your business rather than just forking out money to Meta all the time.
Mm. Great advice. Now, moving on to our first story, which we're going to cover off, is that Wish, who were all over the internet doing a lot of advertising a couple of years ago and probably even last year. The marketplace, the US-based marketplace, they were recently acquired by a Singapore retail conglomerate, Q10 for $173 million. So this was like a total acquisition of their brand, which equates to roughly 1 cent on the dollar from their IPO price of IPO valuation of $17 billion. Now, Paul, you're familiar with Wish. Have you used Wish or seen Wish?
Seen it, never been a shopper, never used it, never. Have you?
No, never. I've been on there before. I've downloaded the app and I looked around. It was a similar thing to like Temu. You look around, it's like there's a lot of stuff, but for me, it's like it's cheap, but I don't see the value in it. So I personally wouldn't buy from them, but apparently a lot of people did. I remember they sponsored the LA Lakers for a time. They had the logo on there. I think they even sponsored a stadium. So there was clearly a lot of money going around. So this is a huge fall from grace. What's your take on this?
Oh, we've seen it so many times before, right? Like, so 170 million. So that's like, there's Aussie brands that have sold for more than that in the last 5 or 6 years. That's obviously a massive fall from grace. Hard to know like exactly what's going on there. Obviously, they spent a fortune, and if we take it right back to business basics, I would assume that they've spent more than they're making, and they've run out of money, and so on. Now that's just generally business 101. That's what happens, and it's just like, again, I don't know what happened. I assume they were doing pretty well at a certain stage, and then you just mentioned a couple of Temu, for example. Well, Amazon's grown, Temu's grown. Chinese manufacturers are selling direct to consumer, so I think everything just got a little bit harder for Wish, and sales probably harder to come by. And it's a lesson for, again, all of us now. Like we've reported on our podcast so many huge names that have just gone pear-shaped, right? I hate to keep going on about it, but it's just for the same reason, really, that we spoke about at the start of this podcast right now, which is just like, hey, tighten up. Spending your way to success never, ever works. And if it does, it works for a very, very short time. And I'm making assumptions, right? But you're just talking about sponsoring the Lakers, sponsoring the stadiums. That stuff's not cheap. And eventually, when you run out of money, it is because you've spent more than you should. So, you'd have to assume that's what's going on there. And because that's the trend at the moment, heaps of people. And again, this is why you and I are talking about efficiency all the time, because we see it firsthand. It's simple. Like, too many people are spending so much money hoping that stuff will work, and it doesn't. It's not that easy. Maybe at a certain time it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You could put a few bucks into things like Facebook and pull out $10, but that doesn't happen anymore. It's just you got to be smarter than that, and hard to know exactly what happened. But what's your take now on Wish?
Yeah, I think they grew at a time when there was a lot of free capital around. Yeah, so a lot of people, obviously they IPO'd for a gigantic sum. A lot of people who in a very frothy market, people who were very bullish, I guess, on their prospects and how they were growing. But I think like marketplace, like any other marketplace, and that's effectively what Wish is that it's a marketplace. It's really hard to make money on that, particularly if you are spending your way to growth. Like if you look at Amazon, for instance, which is probably the most successful marketplace ever, Amazon were very smart in terms of how they grew. They grew very deliberately, very slowly, and they didn't really spend their way to a whole lot of money. If you look at just how they grew in Australia, they didn't grow by spending a lot of money in ads. Sure, they did advertising, but not really like massive big budget, above the line campaigns. That's probably only been a fairly recent thing. But now, 7 years into their Australian journey, or 8 years now, they're over 50% of the online retail market. And that's just by proving value.
Yep.
Again, just over and over and over, just proving value in terms of how quickly they can get you that thing which you really need. Whereas the things you're finding on Wish, are they things you need? Not really. They're kind of like wants, and particularly in this market where people are a little bit more value conscious, I guess, there's less of a need for them. You know, people are looking elsewhere because they're questioning, like, do I really need to buy this thing, from Wish when I can possibly get it even cheaper on Temu, or get something better and actually just pay slightly more. I just don't think they provided enough value, or were they clear enough about what their value proposition was to stand out amongst all the other marketplaces out there. Because there's so many marketplaces out. Every time I go to an event, I always meet someone who's like, I'm starting a marketplace. I'm like, great. Who's your marketplace for? What's your point of difference? What's your proposition? And if they can't answer that, I'm just like, oh, you're going to find it really tough.
Usually they can't. Yeah, because that's right, Mal. It's not marketplaces that are hot. It's what the marketplace is offering. And you made a great example of Amazon, which is like, copped a lot of flack, particularly coming into Australia, and that's now, probably Coles and Woolies aside, probably our biggest online retailer. But you're right. Like, every time they exceed your delivery expectations, they'll give you an option to deliver today on a Sunday, and that just brings you back time and time again, because you know that they'll consistently do that, and that is their point of difference. And that's exactly 100% the difference. Like, I looked at Temu last night and I was like, yeah, cool, it's all this cheap stuff, but I'm like, yeah, why would I? Like, I couldn't quite get myself across the line, because I was like, they don't have what Amazon has. So I think it's a great call out. Marketplaces popping up, businesses popping up because Ecom hot, because marketplaces are hot. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Look, and I think the other one as well is that recently Catch as well, there was a report last week, which we should probably dive into, just showing that Catch is Wesfarmers' biggest Achilles heel right now, because they are losing hundreds of millions of dollars on Catch every week, every year. And that's just interesting that Catch were one of the early marketplaces in Australia. They were the very first deal of the day, one of the first deal of the day, then one of the first marketplaces, and they grew very, very rapidly through that. But now, in terms of the offering, it's become a very undifferentiated offering, because what's different to them versus Woolies or Coles or one of those other marketplaces, or even Barbecues Galore. Whereas other marketplaces, like, let's say OzSale, for instance, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Mariana Franco, the head of marketing at OzSale last week, is that they've got a really clear value proposition in that it's all about fashion. Yeah, it's all about last season's fashion, which you can get at a fantastic price. Yeah, so people go there because it's a destination for that. Whereas Catch, you can get a scooter, you can get protein bars, you can get white goods, you can get anything from there, but it's kind of appealing to all people, and also then appealing to no one.
Yeah, good call out as well. And OzSale's another interesting one, because they went pear-shaped as well. Share price worth peanuts, and kind of had this kind of really irrelevant offering that has obviously now been tidied up quite a lot, and that sounds like that they've sort of found their home again, whereas it previously just felt like, slow moving stock is essentially what it looked like. Catch of the day again, like Gabby and so on did an amazing job with that, and then it sounds like Wesfarmers have really bolstered up. But think of the name, Catch of the Day. You knew exactly what you were getting. You were going to get a red hot deal every day. And then again, it just became, we sell everything. It's like, well, I don't remember the last time I've even really heard of Catch, to be honest.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on to our last story, because you have to go and so do I. Our last story, which we're going to touch on, is a brand which I've personally become a huge fan of, which is Crocs, because they've been in the news lately for two things. One is that Similarweb have recently come out with their report, which revealed Australia's fastest growing e-commerce brands. And in the apparel space, Crocs topped that list as number one, where they had 169% year-on-year traffic growth. Second on the list was Aerobe in terms of traffic growth, and then third on that list was our good friends at Baby Boo, who've been on a tear. But the Crocs one was then backed up by a report which showed that their report, which showed that they actually had doubled their revenue last calendar year, which, considering they were already a pretty big business, that is an incredible amount to be able to show. Like they double the business $2 billion.
That's absolutely wild. First question: have you bought yourself a pair?
I do. I wear them all the time now.
Do
I love them.
you? Okay. Yeah, they're good.
They're so comfortable. They look a little bit different, a little bit quirky. But I like the fact we talked about bedazzling them with the gibbets. I also now have gibbets on my Crocs for the San Antonio Spurs. And everywhere I go, I see more and more people wearing Crocs. I'm at the gym, someone's wearing Crocs. You're at the airport, someone's wearing Crocs. Just walking down the street, always people wearing Crocs. It's becoming more and more prevalent and someone said this to me yesterday, it's almost like they've gone on to it's so daggy, it's cool.
Yeah. I agree. I'm like, I never liked them, but I'm tempted to get on the trend. There's no doubt like that they're a trend, and that's a trend that they manipulated very, very well through. We've talked about it through really like strategic partnerships and the little trinkets and so on. I mean, whoever's doing marketing there is doing such an incredible job. But yeah, look, I think 169% traffic growth. Double revenue. Oh my goodness! Like it doesn't get any better than that. So, and Similarweb is like, the Bible of monitoring traffic and so on. So, and a big shout out, obviously, to as you said, to our friends at Baby coming in third, which is wild as well. So, super exciting, actually.
Look, I think in the case of all three of these brands, they're brands which have really hit on some kind of cultural relevance. If you look at Baby Boot, for instance, they've really hit a nerve in the US where they've found their sweet spot in terms of who their customer is over there. Obviously, we've got a lot of insight into their business, but they really found who their customer is. And that was something we're working towards that. They found that customer base now in the US and are growing rapidly, really rapidly. Similarly with Aerobe as well, Aerobe has doubled down on luxury fashion in the last 12 months, whereas they were trying to be all things to all people. You might have seen the iconic partnership they did a few years ago. That's come to an end. It's natural conclusion, which is fine because they found their niche in terms of high-end fashion, and now they're really accelerating and growing again. And then Crocs have become culturally relevant as this so cool, it's so daggy, it's cool vibe, which everyone's jumping on right now. And also, like you said, the partnerships with, sporting teams, with lots of different artists and athletes and things like that. They're just so culturally relevant as all these other brands are. And I think that's the main thing which any brand needs to look for. Like, what culture are they tapping into and how are they doing it?
Spot on. We've talked about Birkenstock doing something similar and Skechers as well, tapping into Martha Stewart and Harry Kane. And this is a real thing. And it might have been one of our predictions in 2024 as well. Brands will really leverage the power of partnerships to grow, which circles back to our first point about just finding new ways to remain relevant and finding new ways to grow. Because you're 100% right. Like with Birkenstocks, they obviously had a customer. And then they partnered with Jerry Lorenzo and celebrities wearing. All of a sudden, they became like almost a high-end, affordable high-end fashion accessory. Well, Crocs is like just the same, and Baby is the same. And that you're right, they're hitting a nerve with such a specific audience that happens to also be a huge audience. And it's a lesson again for us to just not be generic. Like find our path, even if it's incredibly quirky and wacky and weird. Just find your path. And double down on it.
Love that. And that's a great point to end up on, Paul. I think you're at your destination, and I believe I have to get on to my next thing as well. So
just wondering, I'm just doing pacing, getting my step count up. So
lovely. Yeah. Fantastic. All right, Paul, before we wrap up, anything which you're keeping an eye on this week?
No, not really. Just, again, talking to lots of brands. We both are at the moment around exactly this topic now of just like, hey, how do we make more money? Same efficiency, like you and I just trying to really spread the word on that at the moment. So that's really my focus, is just to keep reminding people that path to profitability is being really good at business. I think you would probably agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and similar as well. It is going to be the year of efficiency. I saw right before I jumped on this that Inside Retail have released the Australian Outlook report with 4 top retail leaders in Australia and their views. So I think we should probably dive into that next week as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. All right, Paul. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week.